We've all seen the movie Men in Black. And I don't know, but I'm pretty sure many of you have seen the movie Adjustment Bureau. And what I'm going to tell you right now is that although both of them were kind of like spoofs, and the Adjustment Bureau was a very serious movie, whereas Men in Black is not. But these are just clever masks to really cover a real phenomenon that has been going on for thousands of years. In my Archaix movie, I kind of went in and explained a little bit about what we have basically extracted from the vast archives of cuneiform that we have found in the Amorite syllabaries, in the libraries of Ugarit and Rashamra, in the older cuneiform that we have discovered among the Assyrian ruins at Ashurbanipal's library, which is actually, 14 centuries after Assyria was the first Assyrian Empire, but still the source materials by which those cuneiform texts basically derived was from an older civilization. And we know that was Akkad, which had fragmented into Calneh, into Babel, into Harappa, into Assyria. And we find that we have extracted all this data all throughout these Archaix presentations. In my published books, you can see the evidence where all this material that was data mined paints a picture. This picture is very clear. And this picture is that there is an exchange of men and materials between our world and a world directly below us. And this has been going on, and it's been covered up, and it's been described culturally in different ways by many different civilizations at different time periods. Now, in the process of putting all these things together, I have also released series of videos, and sometimes videos in the singular, where I demonstrate evidence that unusual things that were going on could only be explained as the existence of agents working between our world and a world below us. One of those years I have been very, very adamant about revealing is 1902. And the truth is, so y'all sent me hundreds of emails. I just haven't had time to go through them and download all the images and PDFs you guys have sent me showing of all the unusual phenomena that occurred in your neck of the woods in 1902. Because I had encouraged many of you to look. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Charles Fort's word for it. Listen, and don't take Gary Warmerdam. He did a lot of research on 1902. Don't take our word for it. Do your own homework. Look in your own local area to see what was recorded in local papers about what happened in 1902. And you guys have done that and send that to me. I'm going to release that in a video. I'm going to do a video that just shows all the stuff from 1902 that you guys have amassed and sent to me that I missed. I'm going to do that. But my conclusion is none of this can be real unless these things are being saved in underworld depositories. And then when it is known, the coast is clear, then these things are released back into the public. And 1902 was one of those years when thousands of independent things and phenomena occurred that are only explainable as a holding pattern that was just holding and holding and holding and holding and waiting for something that didn't really occur, and then unleashed all this when they thought that everything was fine, and they had another 138 years. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you must be new to Archaix, but I have several videos on 1902. And it's a subject I've mentioned in probably 20 or 30 live videos. But the phenomenon it extends beyond the particular years to actual geographical areas. Many of you are way more familiar than I am with all the missing persons in the national parks and the different things that are going around in different places of the United States and abroad, where governments have created whole zones that are no trespassing zones and fence them off and turn them into military facilities or land for whatever purposes. But they're usually geographical areas where people have just vanished, and they have tribal or indigenous traditions attached to those areas as well, that strange phenomena occurred there too, long before the coming of the Western infrastructures that were put in place. This indicates that we're looking at an ingress-egress point to the underworld. And this and throughout my videos, and like I said, there's other people far more qualified to talk about the dumbs, to talk about the underground facilities and military labs all over the United States. I'm really not qualified to tell you that. I do have 2 videos that show over 60 pictures of places that are deep underground, that 18-wheeler trucks have been sent down in elevators to deliver, like just like a shipping bay has cargo containers that are all stacked on the wharfs and then sent to by transport on flatbed 18-wheelers. The exact same thing happens in the underworld. Fleets of 18-wheelers are taken into mountains, and they go down elevators and they unload their cargo, or they load cargo and they come back up and they hit the highways. Yeah, this is more common than you think. So the dumbs, there's a lot of YouTube videos about them, but there's also a lot of published books. We can thank William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse, for really opening the public eye up to the fact that, man, we've been digging and burrowing in underground for a lot longer than people realize. So, 1962, they began the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. And I know you military boys out there know what I'm talking about, how we have the joint arms of the military led by the Air Force at Cheyenne Mountain, and it is a series of military underground facilities that go very, very deep under the mountain into the underworld. It is my personal opinion. I've never been down there, so I can't assert it as a fact, but it's my personal opinion that these dumbs, these deep earth these deep underground military bases, they're only gateways to the actual deep earth biospheres that are down there. They're not the underworld. Just like in the Sumerian texts, I know some of you who have done your homework on the Akkadian, Sumerian, and Elamite cuneiform, you know what I'm talking about. There is a lot of tablet texts that concentrate on the fact that the Anuna were going back and forth between the underworld, which was called the Apsu, the deep, and the surface world. But in order to get to the destinations they need to go to, they had to pass through a series of gates. These gates are the focus of many, many ancient Sumerian epics and tablets. And it is, I believe, that over the passage of centuries and maybe millennia, as the civilizations retranslated older texts into newer copies, just like we do today, I believe that the original meanings were lost and sanitized according to the frames of reference of the scribes that were doing the copying. This means that older texts that were written with sophisticated parlance would have been watered down and made more neutral in their vernacular to a more primitive people who are trying to convey more primitive things. And this is why many of the tablet texts that we find of the Sumerian nature, Sumerian logographic texts and cuneiform is far more sophisticated than the later Babylonian and Canaanite cuneiform, which is more primitive and filled with stories that are fantastic. And it's because a loss of infrastructure brought primitivism into the basically the scholarly mindset. They weren't as sophisticated anymore, did not have the frames of reference. So these gates and these portals that had to be passed through very carefully as the Sumerian gods went back to and from the underworld to the surface world may have been whole facilities that were guarded to get to where they needed to go. The deep, according to the Sumerian concept, was a place that was inhabited, and it was very, very far below. So you can call it the abyss, the Apsu, whatever you want to call it. It's the same concept. So I've also released 2, maybe 3 videos where I go into a very deep philosophical and logical discussions where I'm showing evidence that books translations, different texts are not being preserved on the surface world. That we have evidence that the resurfacing of old translations, the discovery of new books that we know that formerly existed, huge, larger editions when the ancient copies were not as big. We're seeing evidence that a lot of the material that is being reintroduced on the surface after these resets has to be coming from somewhere. If it's not coming from the surface and it's not coming from the sky, then it's coming from the underworld. This is just another data point to consider. There's a lot of evidence for this. So I'm not the only one. You've seen other presentations by other content creators, but I've also showed some pretty compelling material about the underground facility of the Grand Canyon and how the Smithsonian Institution got caught lying, claiming that the men that found that facility did not work for them. There's no record that they were ever employed, and this was their story for 30 years until they were caught by somebody who went into the original Smithsonian archives and found pictures and employment histories of these two scientists. So, but not only that, it's just like somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, there has certainly been found 58 to 59 underground cities in Cappadocia, Turkey alone. This necessarily implies not all of them have been found. So there's probably a lot more, just like the underground facility of Phoenix Hill in China, Feng Shui. So the reason I'm mentioning all these things is these are just data points. Okay, we don't have to theorize that people lived in the underworld for long periods of time. We have found those cities. We don't have to theorize that maybe there was some type of exchange of materials in the ancient world between the underground and the surface. We don't have to theorize. The texts say that. So we don't have to theorize that it's possible to build our own underground facilities today because we've already done it, and it's not even private. It's not even top secret. It's public domain knowledge. So, further data point is that even in the traditions of the world, one of them I can think of off the top of my head is Shambhala in the Himalayan mountains. There has always been a persistent rumor among the locals in that area of the world that there is a thriving underworld civilization and that it is technologically advanced. So Shambhala is not something I'm really qualified to talk about, but I am qualified to introduce it here as just another data point, another frame of reference that we have, that it was a belief. And it is a persistent belief even today that there is an underworld that is inhabited. So I know some of you are familiar with the Vril or the Dark Elves and, Hobwalkies and trolls and bogies and gnomes and dwarves. All these different cultures have different names for the same thing. A race that lives underground and infrequently deals with humans. I'm not even going to go into details if those are good or bad. I'm just saying that there is a exchange of materials. There's an exchange of information. So these traditions are rife. They're all over the world. I don't think there's a single culture out there that does not believe in some type of underworld species or race. We also have, and I document this on my channel, is that we have the data point that UFO activity is so pervasive and widely documented, observed, and experienced that we cannot deny it. But at the exact same time, UFOs are just unidentified flying objects. And the problem is they don't fit the narrative that we've been given. The narrative is that these little ET, little alien riding little vehicles are coming from other worlds and other galaxies, other planets, other star systems, and they're visiting us. But this is not what we find in the historical or in contemporary modern history right now. It's not what we find. The vast majority of eyewitness reports and scientific documentation and government reports is that these objects are all seen coming in and coming out of the ground, and often bodies of water, not in and out of the atmosphere. This is a data point to consider that there is materials being transferred between the underworld and the surface world. We have the testimony, the research, the life work of Dr. Lear. I featured his work on my channel before. Dr. Lear has hard physical evidence of these alien implants that have been put in thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Now, hundreds of thousands of people have claimed to be abducted by UFOs. Dr. Lear has found the proof. Yeah, it's inescapable. And it's something that's technologically advanced to the point where it interfaces with the human biology. I'm not going to go into detail. You can go watch the video about Dr. Lear I have on my channel. But he's discovered implants in people that actually migrate. The implants move with an objective. And when the implant knows that Dr. Lear is using a scalpel to trying to excavate it and extract it from somebody, it actually moves like a parasite inside the person's body to get away from the scalpel. Additionally, Dr. Lear destroyed several of them because he didn't understand what he was dealing with. These implants are completely encapsulated in some type of biomechanical membrane. And it's so hard to cut open, even with obsidian blades, that when it finally opens, it just pops open. And when it does, on contact with the air, the actual implant on the inside burns up. Excuse me. So he had a moment of genius, and Dr. Lear started opening up these implants only inside containers that were full of body fluids that came from the same person the implant had been taken from. And only when it is submerged in that fluid, he can open them up and then study them, and they're technologically advanced. They're actual pure technology. They're only wrapped in a biomechanical membrane, something that mimics the host's genetics. Very, very unusual. That's Dr. Lear. But this is just a data point that materials are being exchanged between the underworld and the surface world. One of the greatest stories of all time is the Roswell UFO crash 1947. And I have two videos that give you a lot of details about what really happened. In the UFO community, there's some pretty brilliant minds, and they have ascertained by looking at all the evidence that it was actually not a UFO crash. It was what is being called an alien assist. This is when an advanced civilization bestows its own technology to a civilization of lesser technological sophistication. And it's done in a staged way, like a UFO crash. This is precisely what happened in 1947, except for the fact it wasn't UFOs from space. This was an assist from a race in the underworld that wanted to give us a quantum leap in technical sophistication. They gave us materials in hardware that we then were able to retro engineer and basically create a whole new element to our military industrial complex. This happened in 1947, and you were told that all these alien objects and artifacts were trucked in a convoy to Hangar 18 at Area 51, and every bit of that was smoke and mirrors. It's untrue. The convoy that left that area and went there was a decoy. It was a total decoy. Oppenheimer was on the other convoy, which was not a decoy. That convoy took those materials to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, retro engineering labs of the U.S. Air Force. That's the real story of what happened. This is another data point. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. It's on my channel. But this is another data point that there has been materials that were exchanged between the underworld and the surface world. Many of you know about the Hopi. The Hopi believed in the ant people. It was a race that was antecedent to them, a sophisticated people. They were called ant people, not because they were small. They were called ant people because they were industrious in their infrastructure. They were very busy. A sedentary race of a nomadic type people. I know it's kind of oxymoronic, but the Hopi, if they had come in contact with people today, if they went 200 years in the future, 200 years ago, and saw our infrastructure today, they would be overwhelmed with the speed by which we do everything. Cars zipping out and in and out of traffic. They would be totally overwhelmed. Jets passing across the sky. Yeah, even people on bicycles would be an anomaly. They're moving too fast. These people didn't move that fast. The ant people are a recollection of a very industrious people with long paths and long roads. What are ants known for? Being on a path, moving very fast, carrying a lot of stuff. So the ant people disappeared, according to the Hopi, and went into the underground where they remain today. That's an old Hopi tradition. So the underworld in ancient Egypt, you could get to it. Although it was very difficult, you had to go to Giza, because somewhere located at Giza was a way to go all the way underneath the plateau, maybe through a labyrinth. But once you got there, you would come across a place called the Kingdom of Seeker. And once you went in, you could not come out unless you found the Gate of Rostal. If you could locate the Gate of Rostal and pass through it, you could be free. But that freedom meant you entered the underworld. Because once you went through the Kingdom of Seeker, there was no coming back this way. So this is just another data point that there is an ancient belief that the underworld was not only inhabited, but it was accessible. Now, adding in support of that data point are two traditions that are very unique. One of those traditions comes out of the book of Tobit, where a demon, I believe it was Asmodeus or Asmodeus's helpers, they were threatened with exorcism, and they were so terrified that this angel was going to exorcise them, they fled to the only place they could be safe from being cast into the abyss or wherever it was. And the text specifically says the demons fled to Egypt to escape the angel. That's a data point, but it's supported by ancient Greek legends, which say that in the old time of the Titans, when Typhon appeared, the gods fled to Egypt to be safe. Again, we have reference to going to the Great Pyramid area to be safe from a cataclysm or safe from something. Remember, Typhon is the exact same thing as the phoenix. So, now, this concept of the surface world in the underworld was also recognized among the early Norse and the Europeans. You guys know that heaven, the realm of the gods, was called Asgard. Where we're at right now, the earth is Midgard, but below us is Niflheim. And Niflheim was occupied. It's the underworld. It is the realm of the dark elves. So all these are just data points before I actually begin my little dissertation. I just want to remind most of my Archaix veterans here, you already know all these things. You already seen my videos. For the newer people, I just wanted them to be aware that these are things that are on the table. These are data points that are all supported by data sets. You got to see those in the videos. But for purposes of this presentation, I wanted to remind you about all these things we've already covered about the underworld. And remember the book of Revelation. It has imagery in the book of Revelation. After the seven seals are broken and the tribulation actually begins, there's an invasion that comes from the deep, the underworld. It's perfectly described in the book of Revelation. They're even described as locusts, But they're not locusts because they're called locusts, but they're described as human. They got human faces, and then it describes all their chitinous armor. So whoever they are, they're humanoid, but they're wearing some really unusual, bizarre, like maybe military suits or something. And Book of Revelation calls them locusts because what are locusts? Locusts are the destroyers of the harvest. What is humanity? Humanity is the harvest. Remember, it's all about the wheat and the tares. So, let's see. Okay, the Book of Revelation, though, it's not unique. Mayan prophecy, too, at the end of the 1,872,000 turnings of the stars, the 13 Bactans, at the end of that, which you know is 2020. Man, I'm getting tongue-tied. Which you know of as not being 2012. As I showed in my published book in 2011, the corrected math shows that the end of the long count is 2046. This is during the tribulation apocalypse period. So it comports with the Book of Revelation. So guys, Men in Black, the Adjustment Bureau, they don't call it the deep state for nothing. I promise you, it has another meaning. So there are researchers that are far more qualified than I that can show the source materials. This isn't I'm a chronologist. I like to show the numbers. I like to show the ancient texts. I like to show old books. But I have to take into consideration what other people are bringing to the table. One of those things is there is a phenomenal amount of data out there accessible to you. You guys surf YouTube. You know, you've been on many platforms. You are very well aware that it is understood that there is a deep state that operates with its own intelligence agencies, its own funding, its own air force, its own infantry, its own mobile military units, its own paramilitary forces, its own contracts, its own laws, bylaws, and its own means of transportation, its own air force. It even has its own methods of transport. They can get all over the world and do the things they need to do, and they stay completely out of the news. So this deep state, I've explained to you guys many times, the elite. There isn't a single member of the elite any of you know. Not one of you can name a member of the elite. I promise you that. Because if you can name them, they're just a puppet. If there is anybody that has come to public consciousness, anyone like Elon Musk, like Donald Trump, anyone, no matter what part they're playing. It doesn't matter if they're partial to being a patriot. It doesn't matter if they're a globalist that actually hates whatever, Germany or the United States or whatever their predilections are. They're all serving unseen individuals that are actually a cabal that's actually running this entire deep state operation. The true rulers of the world are unknown. Just because we have identified many billionaires who do certain things doesn't mean they're running anything. What it means is they're playing a role. They're doing what they're told. So we are witnessing today something unusual. I'm not going to sit here on YouTube and pretend to know exactly what's going on. What I want to bring to your attention is that something unusual is going on. We all know that there was an attempt to do something in the year 2020. And initially, it looked like they were going to be successful. And a lot has happened since then. Great resistance has come since then to make these things not so successful. More resistance than they anticipated. So my point is that we have a benefactor. I don't know where they're operating out of or how powerful, or if they're operating from outside the field and the effects of their decisions are felt inside the field. But this deep state is not in absolute control. It wanted to be. It made a power move in 2020 and tried to follow through in 2021, but it was met with way too much resistance, and too much has now been exposed. But that doesn't bother the deep state, because it's the puppets that fall. All they have to do is give all the puppets up that participated in that to the people, and the people will be satisfied when they see that heads will roll. And then the real deep state and the deep state operatives are still doing what they do. There will be no change. They will continue to rule. So with the Adjustment Bureau and the Men in Black, if we can combine these two concepts, it would answer for us many of the anomalies that we ordinarily would shelve as completely being disassociated from everything else. In the Adjustment Bureau, when things didn't go the way they were supposed to go because reality is scripted and because people are living in reality tunnels, and when they veer too far and create a new reality, it causes problems with the construct. So the Adjustment Bureau identified what those problems were and then began from the perimeter of a person's life negotiating details to corral that individual back into the reality tunnel they were supposed to be. In the movie Adjustment Bureau, we have an individual who completely bucked. And almost the entire bureau had to go after this individual. It was going to mess off reality. So combining that concept with Men in Black, as long as we change the spoof part about Men in Black, about these galactic aliens and all this stuff, and now we just transfer it to the knowns, entities in the underworld, whatever they are. The concept of Men in Black remains true. And it answers for many of the weird things that have happened in recent history in the past 150 years that involved men in black suits and hats who were located in areas where very unusual things began to happen. It explains all these people, predominantly females, who have claimed to have been abducted by aliens or UFOs. And yet, when they are interrogated by virtue of hypnotic regression or some other technique, it's found out that some of their memories cross over, and in the same room they see these little green aliens with big heads, these black elves, in the same rooms against the walls observing everything quietly is 1, 2, or 3 of these black-hatted sunglasses wearing Men in Black. Guys, the Men in Black movie was designed as a spoof to cover up a real phenomenon and to provide misdirection. Remember, it's all about the underworld wants you to believe that all the anomalies don't come from the underground, they come from the sky. And if you believe that, then you would believe the paradigms of the extraterrestrial visitation and ancient aliens. That's why Ancient Aliens is so popular, guys. This is why some of these weirdos that put out all this ancient alien stuff have to deliberately mistranslate Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian cuneiform in order to support their theories. Zechariah Sitchin, Billy Carson. Yeah, I'm going to name them. Those men cannot at all provide any ancient evidence without mistranslating. It's just ridiculous. The periods of time, 432,000 years, is ridiculous to believe that the Anuna descended from heaven and 432,000 years later, the Great Flood happened. It's ridiculous. It's 432,000 turnings of the stars, which is precisely 12 centuries, which is what we find in the Hindu writings. All these great yugas and ages were all 12 centuries long. So these turnings of the stars I've gone over on my channel. I have so many videos that explain the Shar day count systems, even the Mayan system, which began at the exact same time as the Sumerian calendar, the exact same time. But the Mayan didn't count years, didn't care about years. They counted days, just like the Olmec calendar counted days. So we have we have these huge mistranslations of ancient concepts and calendrical mysteries in order to promote these falsities, these ancient alien visitations and all. But as I've shown in my videos, there's a lot of the ancient aliens evidence that is a complete falsification of what's actually being seen. One of those, I have a whole video on. I show you guys what the ancient aliens crowd says this huge sarcophagus lid means of Lord Pakal Votan in the pyramid of, don't get me wrong, I can't even pronounce it, Kilam Bilam, something like that, Kilam Balam. But this, they say it's a guy, a Mayan priest or a king in a rocket ship who's blasting off into the sky. But that's not what's shown on the sarcophagus. On the sarcophagus, that's their interpretation. But as I've shown in my video, and I isolated the different glyphs, and I show you what they're not drawing attention to, is that he's not in a spacesuit. He's in a loincloth, and he's laying back and he's looking through a telescope. And the Mayan picture actually shows exactly what he's looking at. And all along the border of the relief are cataclysm Mayan glyphs. And it shows decorative reliefs of flames. And right where his telescope is pointing is a Mayan phoenix. It's right there for everybody to see. I have never had anyone ever look at that video and even claim that I was wrong. It's so perfectly there. So the ancient aliens crowd is always misinterpreting the data in order to make it comport with their paradigm. This is all done by design, because everything is designed for us to look up when we're supposed to be looking down. All the activity that's happening to the world today is coming from think tanks in the underworld. So this is the origin of the deep state. This is why they can act with impunity. This is why they can get so much done and create confusion and chaos. It's really easy to do. It is so easy for the world to blame Russia for different things that are going on in the world, or China, or North Korea. It's easy for the world to blame all the chaos in South America for being the result of some type of international policies. It's easy to blame the violence and the genocide in Africa to a European nation, when all along all these things are being created. These situations are being financed and created by an organization that acts with impunity from the deep. And this has been going on for a very long period of time. And I also believe that there is a culture of people in our world today who have basically forged an alliance with this entity in the underworld. And they work together, because a group in the underworld that truly wants to control the surface and to rape it for its resources. You know, this has been going on for a long time too, guys. Remember 1902, USS Bannockburn, absolutely packed full of all kinds of grains and cereals that had just left the American Midwest and was going to Europe. That ship was full of food. It just vanished. And it vanished in the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes have been combed looking for this ship. And it's not the only one. Many ships with either a whole bunch of young cadets or a whole lot of foodstuffs and cargo have routinely vanished from our seas. And sometimes they have vanished in full view of other ship captains, and the only thing that we're seeing was strange light over the water. Again, guys, these vehicles, these cigar-shaped vehicles in 1346 and 1347 AD, they opened up their cargo holds and they rained putrid, decayed body parts of forest animals all over Europe. And at that time in history, the people of the day claimed that the Black Death Plague was caused from the stench of these animal parts that had rained even in the interior of Europe. But you let these dumbass academics in the last 100 years tell you, they're going to tell you it was infected rats that came from a disease-ridden China, and that the plague spread from the ports and went inland. That's not what the historical record says of that time period. This redactionism is always occurring, and in each incident that we find texts are redacted, it is always to hide or conceal, to minimize or misdirect, to keep people from understanding that all the woes of this world are actually orchestrated very carefully, not from space, not from heaven, and a lot of times not even from the other governments of the world. These things are done to us from the underworld. We have, you guys actually have the advantage of me. And what I mean is that you already know that I'm closed-minded when it comes to the dissemination of my information to other content creators as far as collaborations go. You already know that I don't mind sharing the Archaix information, but I will not cross-pollinate. I believe that it's of significant advantage to you as the listener that when you want a different perspective, when you want materials that are backed up by data points and data sets, when you want to see the math, when you want to see the charts on all kinds of historical information, you can come to Archaix for free and spend months here just watching and looking at all the different videos that you want to check out. And you still won't finish because I'm not done. I'm releasing too much content. I have a lot more to release. This is an advantage to you because when you burn out and when you go through too much, it just becomes too much. You have the advantage of going to John Levy's channel. John Levy's channel is at a different speed than mine. It's rich in detail. It's very visual. Not only John Levy, but Robert Seifer. It's a different speed. You can go to those channels and you can take in more data. You can look at all this stuff and you can see their perspectives and you can add pieces that I would ordinarily miss because I'm so focused on the chronological presentations of my material. Then you can go to the Ancient Aliens channels and now you can take your new Archaix data and you can separate fact from fiction and you can learn even more than I do because I don't have time to go watch other people's videos. Then you can go to, some of these really esoteric, mystical channels, and some of them are pretty good. I've been hearing a lot of good about a few of them, but I just don't know. I'm not really impressed with tarot. You guys already know that. I'm not trying to piss off anybody in the tarot deal, although some of them have attacked me. It's no big deal. I don't really care about that. But it's not the method I care about. It's the man or the woman. That's the individual that is important in any type of occult or mystic system. It's not the system itself. So you guys have the advantage of multiple different perspectives. You can go from channel to channel to channel to channel to build your own personal wealth of data and information. So I understand why people get frustrated with me when they leave certain comments and you automatically assume that I'm supposed to be on board with what you're talking about, and then you meet this resistance from me. Listen, that resistance that you get from me in the comment section a lot is not personal. It's not. It's me protecting the integrity of my data because the cross-pollination personally offends me. And let me give you an example. I have invited everyone on YouTube that has a channel to use my material. Even my haters. I don't care. I got so many haters and they use my material all the time. I really don't care. But listen, it's when you use the Archaix data and then you turn around and you add your own stuff to it that I haven't looked at it. I don't know what your bibliography is. I haven't checked it out. I haven't seen it right. And then you rehash it back to me as something different. That's cross-pollination. Now you're expecting me to accept a modified model based off injections you put that I can't verify. So cross-pollination is dangerous. And that's why I highly respect a lot of YouTubers who stick to their guns. They are all about what they do, and that's all they do. Even if I disagree with them, I'm going to tell you now, I disagree with Ben Davidson. Not on a personal level. I just believe that the world we live in isn't the world he's living in. And that's okay, because I tell you guys all the time, we may live in the same world, but we are not living in the same universe. I believe that NASA is one of the most deceptive intelligence agencies this world has ever seen. That's what I personally believe. And there's too much direct evidence that I have seen in the past 40 years to justify that belief. I will stand by that belief. So NASA's doing almost the exact opposite of what they portray to do. And they're paid handsomely for that. They are to create a paradigm so that people will believe that what you're looking up in the sky is more than holographic. NASA's job is to perpetuate the fiction that we can actually go in space. Even though the Russians know we never went nowhere. They fried all their mice and dogs and monkeys. They knew NASA didn't send any men to the moon, but they were on board with it because even Russia's controlled by deep state. Everybody's controlled by deep state, which basically begs the question: if all the governments of the world are actually playing a role, this means from cabinet level, parliament, presidents, prime ministers, everybody's playing a role. They've all signed the contract. So if the level of deception is that high up, then that means down the hierarchy, all the way down to the individual employees of each government apparatus, then that means everything is deception. It also infers that those lower don't even know what's really happening. They're just following orders. Just following orders and getting a paycheck. But we still have a benefactor because the world isn't really a bad place. We hear about bad shit all the time. That's what the news does. Negative default programming. It just puts you in that vibration. Because I'm telling you now, if you're listening to my voice and I irritate you, if you're listening to my data and it pisses you off, then you're probably a member of the collective. You're probably somebody who actually finds value in mainstream media. But if you don't find value in mainstream media, and if it pisses you off and makes you vibrate at a really unstable level and your frequency is just totally off, then I promise you that you're a much more spiritual individual than you think you are, because the media was designed to kill the spirit, and that's what it does. It's fear programming at its best. I have coined that in Archaix as dungeon programming, and it's very old. Even before we had telecommunications, dungeon programming was often used by lords and barons and kings and queens to put out false messages into a community to raise the state of fear and discontent, and then create a staged event that would justify that fear, and then turn around and create an event that would basically save the people from the very fear that they had, which was unjustified. There was nothing to fear in the beginning. And this problem reaction solution plan is way before the Nazis. This goes back to ancient times. But the playbook has been preserved through every reset in the deep. The deep state have been playing this game for a very long time. So I'm on board with the movie The Adjustment Bureau. I'm on board with the fact that there are agents that walk among us that do their best. Now, they can't do it to everybody. They don't have that much power. They're not that big in numbers. But on really important events, they're there to guide the narrative, to control the holography, to make sure that mass human awareness stays in check. This is the same thing as Men in Black. Those agents do exist. They're not a part of the CIA. They're not FBI. They're not almost any alphabet agency out there, guys. the true men in black, the true Adjustment Bureau, the true deep state, they operate out of the underworld. And there are hundreds of places on the surface world where gigantic structures have intentionally been built to cover up ingress and ingress and egress points in and out of this world below us. Guys, remember on my channel, I go into a lot of theory. I tell you why I believe there are hundreds of millions of people already living in deep earth biospheres and have been down there for a while now. And I believe there's an ancient race they live among. I believe there's a whole nother language spoken down there. They have their own economy. They have their own mining districts. They have their own fossil fuel refineries. Yeah, oil is everywhere. That's unlimited amounts of oil in the under. And they're also spread in facilities all around the world because they never know. Subduction zones change. Subsidence creates all kinds of problems. It's very difficult to predict what areas of the world are going to sink thousands of feet and what areas of the world are going to raise 10, 12,000 feet, all within minutes when the Phoenix phenomenon occurs. So because this can't be predicted and can't be really known, they have facilities spread out everywhere. Because all throughout history, when these real big Phoenix events occur, I promise you, there's been whole facilities that have never been heard from again. They're gone. But that's the Men in Black. That's the Adjustment Bureau. If you haven't seen the movie The Adjustment Bureau, know what I'm talking about. It's a really good movie. But they're all just data points showing that, look, man, we've already got a lot of evidence for all this. So is it really a leap to think that there's a deep state really operating out of the underworld? No, it's not a leap. It's not a leap. They've basically just told us this in movies and media. By their behavior. There's like I said, there's a lot more qualified people who have real tangible research with very good bibliographies, eyewitness accounts of the very things I'm telling you right now. This is just a general summary showing you the direction a lot of the Archaix output has gone. It makes sense because Archaix mainly focuses on the ancient records, the historical records, things that we can verify. I really don't talk about a lot of modern things. But in this right here, it seems that this deep state that's operating all around the world seems to be the very same deep state that was operating in ancient times as well. Remember, I have a very, very informative video about the oracles and how those were actually intelligence agencies, and I explained to you how they operated. It's the same thing. I should have mentioned them earlier too. It's the same thing. The deep state's been around for a long time.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms
to push their own personal bias, and agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms
to push their own personal bias, and agenda
to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false news
has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.